Hi guys, it's Kaz here, and today I'm going to be doing my February wrap up, so let's just dive straight in. So the first thing I read was Check Please Volume 1 by Ngozi Ukazu. This was, or is still, an online comic that you can read for free, so check it out if you want. I'll leave it in the description and all that jazz. But it's basically just a slice of life comic about this guy Bitty and being in the hockey team at university, and it's just really sweet and nice, and not much happens realistically when you think about it. They play hockey, there's friendships, there's parties, there's relationshipy stuff, all that sort of stuff, but it's just really nice. And I shall show you the artwork because that's what we do here. So this is the sort of artwork we have in here, and it's just a super fun and cute and wholesome and nice time. He likes baking, he plays hockey, it's just good. After that I read If This Gets Out by Sophie Gonzalez and Cal Dietrich. This one is about two members of a boy band that secretly get together, and it's this whole thing. So first of all, let me start from the beginning. Going into this, I was like, right, I'm not going to try and see any sort of Larry parallels. If you're not familiar, Larry Stylinson is the pairing of Louis Tomlinson and Harry Styles from One Direction. I was on Tumblr for many years, I know all the lore. So I knew that both authors have said it's nothing about that, and I was trying not to see that, but I think it's the first chapter. I was reading this, and one of the characters was the one in the band that doesn't use his voice, but all of the audience absolutely love him and want him to do more, and I was like, that's Louis Tomlinson. Accidentally in my head I was like, all of the fans used to always moan that Louis didn't have many vocals in the songs, and they loved him. So I accidentally thought that. And then the other guy that's in this pairing was the one where it was, I think it said something like he was growing his hair out, which is a very non thing. But then in my head I was like Harry did. But luckily after that first chapter, all of that went out the window and it didn't feel like Larry Stylinson, and it was all good. So if you're reading this and you read the first chapter and you think, after that it all went away. But anyway, I thought I'd just reflect on that. But I actually really enjoyed this book. I enjoyed it more probably than I thought I was going to do. I didn't expect to not enjoy it, but I really liked the inner sort of management side of this. Obviously there's a lot about these relationships. It's very drama filled. One of them is gay, but he's not allowed to say he's gay because he's in a boy band, and then the management don't want people to know. You know how it is in real life. But I really enjoyed like the manager side of this, the controlling side of this. All four of the band members have different aspects of their personality that are being controlled by the people in charge of them, who are getting all the money out of them. And it was just really interesting to read this book, even like disregarding any of the romancy stuff. It was just really interesting to read. Like one of them was very prim and proper. He didn't like being the centre of attention, yet he was forced into the role of like the sexy one and was made to wear the revealing outfits and do the sexy dances, and he didn't want to be that person, but he was forced into that role. And then you've got one of the characters who, like I said a minute ago, doesn't really do much vocals, and when he does it's very neutral vocals, but he's got a really good voice and he's been training for years and he can hit all these notes, but he's not allowed to. He's put in the position of like almost one of the people in the background. And then one of them wants to write his own songs, but he's not allowed because it's bubblegum pop and they don't want him to have any voice in their songs. And one of them is just really dealing a lot with just himself. Like they've made him change his name, they've made him use a nickname because his name was too similar to one of the other guys, and they make him be the prim proper one when he's really the party animal who likes to flirt with people but he's not allowed to. And then there's talks about substance abuse in here and using something to try and like have some sort of control in his life. It's really interesting, all these different aspects, even without the drama-filled romance. But then the drama-filled romance was also very good to read as well. It was interesting. There was a lot of miscommunication, which normally I hate, but I didn't feel too mad about it in here. I think that Sophie Gonzalez does miscommunication really well, because it's not one of them ones where it's like, oh, I can explain, and then they don't explain. It's more just like angsty teenagers being angsty teenagers, and I'll accept it in the way it's written. So yeah, all in all, I really enjoyed this book, and yeah, if you've been having and ahhing thoughts about it, maybe give it a try. even just for the backstory stuff, the management-y stuff, they're being controlled, they're having to wear certain clothes and have certain hairstyles and not allowed to interact with people, and yeah, it was really good. After that I read I Have No Secrets by Penny Jolson. This is about a girl with cerebral palsy who has quite severe cerebral palsy, so she doesn't have any vocal abilities and she's in a wheelchair, she can't move, and her carer, the carer's boyfriend, is a dick, but he's very like, oh, I'm such a nice person in front of everyone else, but because he thinks that she can't interact with people or she can't tell anyone, he shows his true colours in front of her, and basically he admits to a murder and thinks nothing of it because what's she gonna do about it? And then her carer goes missing and it's all about her trying to have a voice and tell people and explain what's happening. And yeah, it was really good. I enjoyed it. It's written quite young, so it's really easy to follow. It's easily paced. I can't remember how old she is, maybe 16 I think, and it's all from her perspective. So you have these times of a frustration, like for example, she really likes tomato ketchup on her chips, but then one time she made some sort of noise or she did something to her mum or blinked or something, and she took that as, oh, she doesn't like it, so then she's never allowed it again, and like little things like that really irritate her. And it goes from her being really content with her life to sort of getting more angry with it, with not being able to explain these feelings and these truths that she knows about this guy, especially after her carer goes missing, because she wants to find her because she really likes her. So yeah, I thought it was a really good book. It also deals with adoption and fostering because she is adopted and she has other siblings that are adopted and fostered, so you have that in there. And there's also a little bit of backstory about her birth family and some other stuff that happens there, which I won't say because it's like part of the story, spoilers maybe. So yeah, I thought it was a good book. After that I read Squire by Sarah Figa and Nadia Shamas. This was an ARC provided by Harper 360, so shout out to them. And yeah, I really enjoyed this. It is about a girl who is from a small sort of tribe of people, but then the colonizers are trying to get people from those little places to come into their military, and there's this whole thing like, oh, if you come in, we'll let your family come and stay in the places instead of out in the sticks, and you'll have a place to stay and you'll have a nice home. So it's like manipulative in that, like, come and fight for us against your people, but we'll let you have things. And mostly it's about the sort of camp going through there and different characters from different little tribes getting together, and our main character is from one that is the main one that these colonizers are going against, so she keeps that hidden so people don't know that that's where she comes from. And yeah, it was a really enjoyable book, and I'm sure it will look really nice when it's published because I read it in black and white, but it's not in black and white. We got a few pages in colour. It looks like this, so it's a really nice colour palette as well. So we're halfway through. Let's nip on over to a message from one of the sponsors and then I shall be back with the rest of the bookies. So next up I read The Wild Truth by Karen McCandless. So this is a sister of Chris McCandless, who was the guy that went off into the wild on his own, went to the bus, stayed there for a while and then died there. You've probably heard of his story from Into the Wild, the film or the book. Well, this is kind of another side of the story because throughout the book and the film it's kind of portrayed that he had a really nice family life. He came from this middle class family who were really lovely and they all loved each other and they all had a great time. But then this is his sister saying, that's not actually true, so let me give you some backstory about the bad shit. And his formative years, his younger childhood, seemed like an absolute wild time. It's a lot of family drama, a lot of abuse, verbal and physical, and This book I have mixed feelings about because I thought it was really interesting and important to learn that side of their story, but also there's quite a lot of chapters in here that is about Karen later on in life, like 10-20 years after he died. She's talking about her life, her business, her husband, and it felt a little bit like it didn't belong in what this is portrayed as, but this is kind of part, well, what it says, the secrets that drove Chris McCandless into the wild, part that, but also part biography and sort of life of Karen that doesn't really fit into those things. And I understand that she wants to put her sort of life also out there and say this is what I am, but I felt like sometimes it felt like it didn't fit with what this was trying to be. But the bits that did fit with this I thought were really important parts of this story, part of Chris's life. It also made me want to reread or rewatch Into the Wild again, just to like with this context, and then do it again. But at the beginning of this book there is an introduction by John Krakauer, who wrote Into the Wild, basically saying, I knew all of this stuff. Karen showed me letters, she showed me proof of all this bad shit that happened in the background of their family life, but she also asked me to not put it in the book because she didn't want to like paint her parents as horrible people or put them in more like bad light. But also now she's like, but people think that Chris went off and he was selfish and horrible and was nasty to his family, so she wants to say actually this is what happened. So yeah, it was a 3-star read for me. Like I say, some of it was really interesting and really important, but it did sort of drift off quite often, and I'd be reading a chapter and being like, okay, I understand you want to talk about your life, but what is the relevance here to do with anything that we're talking about? But you know, I understand that she wants to talk about her life as well, so I'm not going to go against her, but I'm also not going to say that I enjoyed them parts as what this should be and what it's marketed as. So yeah, definitely something you should read if you're interested in Chris's life and what happened there, because it does go into some crazy shit. We'll leave it there, but ask me in the comments if you want to know more, I guess. After that, I read The Raising by Stephen Dos Santos. This is the third and final book in the Torchkeeper trilogy, and unfortunately I didn't enjoy this one as much as the first 2 books, which is unfortunate because I've been wanting to finish the series for quite a few months. I keep saying I'm going to read the book, and I finally have, and I was like, ah. I didn't hate it, but I think one of the things I really loved about the first 2 books was how all of the secondary and supporting cast were written so well that you cared about them. So in the first book there's these trials that are going on where these people have trials to become an imposer, which is like one of the people in the government that imposes the law on all of the little people. It's dystopia and the government's horrible as people, everyone's in poverty. And then you're forced into these trials to become the people that are forcing all of your family down into the sticks. And in them trials, each person has 2 incentives. So whenever a person comes last in the trials, obviously there's always someone that comes last. They then have to choose between 2 of their incentives, which are generally family or friends or loved ones. And the person they choose is killed in a really horrific way as like an incentive to not come last. So obviously really horrific, but in those books, or in the first book, that's when it happened, you really cared about every single character. You didn't want anyone to come last. It wasn't like you were just rooting for the main character to not have his family or his friends murdered. It was always horrible when someone came last, and then you saw their emotions and them having to pick these people that they loved and see these horrific ways that they're murdered. You cared about every single person. And then this last book, most of it happens where there's only like 1 or 2 characters, so you don't really get that feeling of all these characters coming together, even though that is exactly what this book is about. It's about the resistance to this government and all these people coming together, but most of it takes place just like on their own. So in that sense I didn't enjoy as much. I felt like it was a little bit more of a slog to get through because it's like these 2 characters, but I want to see what everybody else is doing to do their part, you know? So unfortunately it wasn't as good as the first 2 books, but I appreciated it where it went. There was a really weird twist in the second book, and then this one is a lot about that twist. and I'm like, all right then, it's weird, I'll accept it. But the ending did make me cry lots, so you know, we'll accept that. When I say cry, I mean like throat closed up because it's in so much pain. So yeah, we love it when we cry at books, so it wasn't horrible, but it wasn't as good as the first 2 books. But yeah, I'm glad that I finally finished that series. After that I read Boys Don't Cry by Mallory Blackman. This is about a young boy, 17 years old, and he's just hanging about at home waiting for his A-level results to get in because he's going off to university, he's going to make a life of himself. And then his ex-girlfriend turns up with a baby who is like a year old, and then she drops the bomb that, hey, this is your kid, you didn't even know I was pregnant, but here's your kid. And then she goes to the shop, but then never comes back and says basically, you deal with her because I can't. So he is thrust into this world of fatherhood at 17 without even knowing that he had a baby on the way. Obviously has nothing prepared, doesn't know what he's doing, doesn't know how to even hold a baby. So it's all about that and his family trying to figure out what's going on and how to raise this baby. I will say that he's quite unlikable at the beginning, which I applaud because he's a 17-year-old teenager who has got his hopes on going to university and doesn't want this happening to him. So it makes sense it's going to be a little bit resentful and like, why is this thing here? Go away. So I appreciate that Mallory Blackman did that, and she didn't try and just make him sympathetic straight away. He was annoyed, he was angry, he was selfish at times. He was a teenage boy thrust into this situation, and yeah, I thought it was written really well and I enjoyed the journey that they went on. There's also, you see from 2 perspectives, so his younger brother also has a perspective and he's gay, which is something I didn't know going into this, so I was like, cool, more rep, a gay black teenage boy also in this story. But this came out like, what was it, 2010 or, yeah, 2010. So I do think that some of the brother story was a little bit cliche, and I do feel like it sort of went in a very obvious way when it happened. I was like, oh, it would be nicer if it was a little bit different. But it came out 12 years ago, so I'm not too mad about the fact that it's a bit cliche. I'll accept that. But just know that it is. But it was a really good book. I enjoyed it and it was a good time. And then last but not least, I had a day or 2 left of the month, so I thought, hey, let's get this read. It is The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen Volume 2, and I gave the first one 3 stars. I wasn't really a fan of it. I gave this one 2 stars. I'm definitely not a fan of it, so I'd already unhauled the first one, but I thought, I've got this, I'll read it. Yeah, I wasn't a fan. This one is also getting unhauled. The thing about The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is like, it's this league of all these different characters that people know in like literary, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Nemo, you know, these people, the Invisible Man that everyone knows. But I feel like the story has all these characters and then it doesn't do anything with them. They're just there, and it's like, alright, these characters could be anybody. So it felt a little bit like a gimmick. It's like, oh, look, all of these people that you know, but then also why? There's no reasoning behind it. And this was just really weird. Like straight away at the beginning, these weird creatures from Mars just come down to Earth in the like 18 whatevers. And then why? I can't even remember what happened in the first one, so I don't even know if there was any sort of sci-fi off-world stuff happening then. I can't remember. But yeah, this just felt really weird, and I didn't care about any of the characters. I didn't care about the story. The only thing I found mildly amusing was near the end, one of the characters say, oh yeah, and this park was, they named him after Mr. Hyde, and I'm like, haha, Hyde Park, that exists. And that was the only thing that I thought was a little bit fun to chuckle at. The rest of it I was just blah, 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 don't care. Blah. Don't particularly care for the art, didn't care for the story, didn't care for the characters. Meh. Not the best way to end a month, but you know, it happens. And it was another thing off my TBR, so I don't mind that much. So yeah, so let me know down below what you read in February. If you've read any of these, if they sound interesting, if you agree or disagree with my opinionos, let me know down below. And if this is your first video by me and you enjoy it, then please check out some of my others. And if you continue to enjoy, then please subscribe. That would be awesome. Anyway guys, I'll see you in a few days with another video.